So we've got a couple of questions from Matteo. And he says, in the example given, there are 4 long sentences in the rationale. Is this okay? Or is it better to have a shorter rationale to have more room for eligibility criteria, results, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, we say ideally 2 to 3 sentences. Obviously, I picked one abstract that was well written overall and stuck with that. I thought it would be easier to follow rather than picking abstracts from different reviews. So, but yeah, it's just as long as you get the key information. I wouldn't like to see any information sacrificed to allow more room for eligibility criteria. So the guidance is try to stick to 2 to 3 sentences. But if you do need to go over that, you can, as long as you're within the 1,000 words. So yeah, it's just guidance. It's not a hard and fast rule, as long as you get the key information there and don't sacrifice important content.
Oh, thank you. And another question from Matteo. So in the outcome section, should authors be specifying the time points at which outcomes are measured?
That's not, no, you don't have to specify the time points for each individual outcome according to the PRISMA reporting standards. If you wanted to put a point in about a statement in about the time points, you could, but it's not a pre-requirement. So it kind of depends on what your time points are and your outcomes.
Okay, and a question from Jacqueline. So the objectives and the eligibility criteria have a lot of repetition. Do you have any comment on that?
The objectives are slightly broader. There will be repetition because you're testing one intervention versus another. So you need to state what the health condition is, the intervention and the comparison. But the eligibility criteria did go into more detail. So it's rather than age-related macular degeneration, it talked about the specifics. So it could be active primary or recurrent. It also stated the age of participants, so they had to be age 50 or above. So there are slight differences in that the eligibility criteria goes into more detail. You could also state what was excluded from that eligibility criteria if there was something really important to note there, which wouldn't feature in the objectives.
Okay, thank you. And so Leanne is asking, so in previous examples in the focused review format, outcomes have been divided into critical and important outcomes. Is this no longer the case?
Yeah, there was a bit of sort of conflict about that because in the focused review format, you're supposed the guidance is critical and important, but we have sort of decided that it should just be the important outcomes that the sort of critical outcomes that feature in the summary of findings table that should be stated under the outcomes in the abstract. And I think the template or the guidance for the focused review format is going to be amended to show that it should just be those summary of findings outcomes in the abstract.
Okay, thank you. So we've got a question from Lockman. I'm not sure this is a question that we can necessarily answer. So anyway, so the question is, how can we judge little to no difference between interventions? Any points on that? I don't know what you think about that, Lindsay.
As in what the author stated was little to no difference.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect when you're talking about little to no difference between interventions, that's a kind of a thing that's informed by kind of clinical knowledge, isn't it? As to,
yeah,
what is the point where, you'd want to make a decision between one treatment and another,
yeah.
and when does it not really matter? Do you think that's right, Lindsay?
Yeah, I would agree with that, Rachel. It's obviously for the abstract, it's just a summary version, but if you check the full review, you might read into a bit more about how the authors came to that decision and if they'd set sort of thresholds to um, that would define what was a little to no difference. But yeah, that's something that's not really covered in the abstract, but it would be informed by clinical knowledge, and more detail would be in the main body of the review.
Um, Fantastic, thank you. Okay, another question from Leanne. In the synthesis of results section, should authors be using the grade kind of way of expressing the results? So they should be talking about probably and probably a difference or maybe a difference in the results.
Yes, thank you for raising that, because I was actually going to state that this isn't, while this is a good synthesis of results section, it's not perfect because they haven't used the grade wording specifically. But again, I wanted to stick with one abstract and use it for the entire presentation. Yeah, but you're absolutely right, Leanne. It would say you would follow the grade depending on the level of the certainty of the evidence. That would influence what wording you would use around. So you could say probably or may. So yeah, that would be one minor improvement to this abstract, would be using the grade wording around the certainty of the evidence.
Brilliant. And another question from Matteo. So in which section should relevant ongoing studies be mentioned?
So you would probably want to state that under the included studies section. So yeah, if you had a lot of ongoing studies, you would probably want to provide a brief statement about them, like the number, the specific population that were interested, the intervention, the comparison. So yeah, not too much detail, but you would just want to provide readers with a bit more information about the ongoing studies. Yeah, that's a good point. That should be included under this heading.
Brilliant. Then we had a couple of really nice thank yous from
Thank you.
Damaris and Solomon. Thank you. I hope I pronounced those names right. Yeah, and as Oliver's said, everybody will get the recording and the presentation slides in the next couple of days. There's a comment from Ursula saying that outcomes are still divided between critical outcomes and important outcomes in the method section in the main text.